From the Sky News Centre, this is Paul Murray Live.
G'day, mate. There is only one story in the country right now. Yes, we will lead the program with it like everyone else, but I've got a very different angle. One story, wall to wall, is all over the TV news tonight.
With real concerns of an imminent attack, police say they've smashed a youth terror cell lurking in Sydney's southwest.
An alleged terror cell of teenagers has been arrested in southwest Sydney in major raids involving hundreds of police officers.
7 young people have been arrested and 5 others are being questioned after a series of raids.
Now, lots in this. There was a term that was being used by the police today that seemed like a bit of a word salad, and for a couple of hours nobody would put any more detail onto this term despite the fact that it was there in the press conference.
From that initial incident, a number of associates were identified that we believe warranted further police attention and investigation. We will allege that these individuals adhere to a religiously motivated violent extremist ideology.
Now, we all know what it means, but we also don't know exactly what all of those words thrown together mean. It feels like a way of trying to put an umbrella above the actual details of what's going on. By 6 p.m, the details were clear.
It was thought the alleged church attacker had acted alone, but as 400 officers searched homes in Bankstown and Greenacre, an alleged web of extremism had been uncovered and was widening.
We identified links between the alleged offender and a network of associates and peers who we believe shared a similar violent extremist ideology.
3 things in particular, particularly concerning about this apart from the obvious. The first is how old these people that were caught up today in the raids are.
We're talking 15, 16, 17-year-olds. However, the terrorism landscape and the radicalisation of youth online is a continuing problem for us.
Now, that means they were born here. That means that they are our fellow Australians. There is a huge issue here that people that are born in this country, that are afforded all of the comforts and compassion of this country, would be accused of starting to turn against their fellow citizens. Now, none of them have been charged at this point in time. The code of helping police with their inquiries may result in one, none, all being charged. We'll see what happens in the next few hours. The second thing that's particularly concerning is that Mike Burgess, the boss of ASIO, said 50-50 chance of a terrorism attack in Australia in the next 12 months. Now, we all hope the 50% that turns out to be is no, but 50-50?
Terrorism threat level is possible, which means there is a 50% chance that in the next 12 months, or even right now, there's someone who's planning an act of terrorism or will conduct an act of terrorism.
And then there's the third bit. The third bit that is not as important as all of the other details that I brought you now, but they are a preview into what almost feels like a deliberate attempt to change the subject from the things that I've already shown you tonight and you've been talking about all day. Now, this is the stuff that you have not heard anywhere else because it happened very late in the day. There is an organisation that is called the Australian Muslim Advocacy Network. They have a very significant social media presence, and yes, they're involved in all of the current struggles around the world. Let's put that to one side. Because they've decided to go after the very language, even the vague language, that was being attached to what we have all seen happening today. Now, this didn't come up as a full-blown news story that you would see in other parts of the media. Instead, a lot of those websites have those live blogs where lots of little details that come through the day are all there. We've got one at skynews.com.au, and this came through in The Australian. Strap yourself in. The Australian Muslim Advocacy Network has called the term religiously motivated violent extremism to be ditched, saying the label, which is used in relation to the counter-terrorism raids in Sydney, has led to increased hate incidents toward the Muslim community. Back to me. That statement came out very shortly after a police operation that took place today. As best as I know, there are no examples of some sort of uptick in Islamophobia that has happened in the past, 6 hours in Sydney? Instead, their issue seems to be with the term in general, suggesting, and as they go on to explain, that the term itself leads to a profiling of all Muslims. Now, let's say it once, let's say it 1,000 times. In the same way that when you say pedophile priest, you do not mean all Catholics. When I say radical Islam, I do not mean Islam, and I do not mean Muslims, all Muslims in the country, okay? The reality is that unless I say that, organisations like these are able to run off to a whole series of authorities and say that I'm trying to demonise the Islamic population of Australia. No way. We've also, remember, the white pride stuff on Australia Day, the neo-Nazis getting off the train? Yeah, we talked about that. We've talked about right-wing terrorism. We've talked about all sorts of things that have taken place. We've talked about the issues to do with mental health and Bondi, okay? So we're not being selective, and for those that are only watching this video, watching for where I put a foot wrong, or tonight's program, for which term we accidentally stumble upon in a free-ranging discussion like normal people, I'm absolutely aware of the small number of people we are talking about that have been dealt with by police and the vast Islamic population and the faith in general. Let's go back. So, the Advocacy Network, it turns around and says what it does here, right? Then they go on to say, religiously motivated violent extremism is not a neutral term, but is designed to link community panic and fear about terrorism to a whole religion. Now, again, as ASIO boss Mike Burgess pointed out today, there was an example of a Christian attack. This term was used about that attack here in Australia. No one thought that meant all Christians. And no one thinks it's all Muslims. No question. It says that it's about fear, about terrorism to a whole religion, rather than focusing the public on political motives. Now, again, I'm not sure what the political motives are that are at the heart of what happened a couple of weeks ago and the person who's alleged to have participated in it. And I don't know what the political motives are about the people who were raided today. But final part here, and I know that I'm sending our technical team crazy because normally we don't go back and forth during the graphics, but I appreciate this, guys. White supremacist or incel-inspired terrorism is ideologically motivated, yet when the offender is Muslim, the whole religion and community are demonised. Well, I've already said why I don't believe that to be the case. Religiously motivated violent extremism also glamorises violent acts as religious, playing directly into the hands of politically motivated groups like ISIS. So now the police, who are trying not to use specific religions and splinters of it in radicalised forms, are now apparently doing the work of ISIS. Nice trick. Last one here. After Mike Burgess was at the National Press Club today, they decided to double in on firstly what he said, and then this statement again was all about in relation to what police had said at their press conference and the raids that took place today in Sydney. They're also called out the ASIO boss Mike Burgess for using words religiously motivated in the National Press Club. On Wednesday, the New South Wales Police Commissioners rushed designations led to irreparable prejudice against young people who will be tried before the courts. Now, this takes us back to the rubbish that we were dealing with last week, that somehow there was 2 cities and 2 violent incidences, but one was declared to be a terrorist attack and one was sort of put down. Well, for obvious reasons, the attacker in Bondi, and I am happy to say whatever his motivation was, if anyone can produce a diary, an entry on the internet, a collection of radicalised thoughts or websites, then we will start to move that into that category. But the police were able to designate this, and it's not just one police officer, multiple people were able to designate that as a potential terror attack, and they were able to make that categorisation. But the idea here that automatically let's not talk about the raids, let's not talk about the fact that it's kids that are born here, let's not talk about how they got so screwed up that they think that violence towards their fellow citizens is the right thing to do, and for what cause, what politically motivated scenario, or whatever interpretation of whatever they've got in their screwed up heads is the potential for violence. No, let's talk about the language. Let's have the easy conversation about the terms that we use rather than the tough conversation, which is the behaviour that is happening before our eyes. Now, we are not where we were 20 years ago, when no doubt there were many times when tougher terms, more pejorative terms, were being used when there were incidents or plots or alleged plots. But 20 years on, we do our best to make sure that language is as respectful as possible. But let's not muck around. The police are alleging in their public comments today that this group of teenagers were not linked by a mutual love of rugby league. They were not linked together about video games like Minecraft. They were linked together by a bastardised ideology. An ideology that is a bastardisation of a great religion. Now, as you know, I'm an atheist, so I don't rank the religions, but I respect people of faith. And I understand the genuine, legitimate people of faith, and I know the people who seek to subvert or use faith as the cudgel for bad behaviour, let alone potentially criminal or violent behaviour. We're going to talk about this a lot tonight, Bromwell Bishop Stephen Conroy, about this tactic of let's talk about the language as opposed to let's talk about the problem. Because the problem is kids that are born here. Kids that are born here and kids that are finding a way to find up a very screwed up worldview. That despite the peace, prosperity, freedom and support that our community has to people who have born here, people whose parents have come from somewhere else or generations before. We are a country that tries to do its best. Yet police tell us today, and in their own words I'll show you, that these people, again, were not planning a series of potentially violent events because of their love, again, of a particular sport, a particular pastime. So nice try, and no doubt there'll be someone somewhere passing every little word, trying to run off to the umpire to say, see, stoking division, completely ignoring what I said earlier in the conversation. Not saying it because it's a caveat, saying it because I actually believe it, saying that in the same way, pedophile priests does not equal all Catholics, that radical Islam does not equal Islam or all Muslims, okay? But that doesn't mean we're not going to have a tough chat. We're going to have the tough chat. We'll do it tonight. This is what the police say, linked to the people that were arrested today as part of these raids. Again, none have been charged. Again, the situation about what happened last week has not gone through the courts. We are operating off the language that has been given to us by the authorities.
They're all obviously from very similar areas in the community. There's a mixture of ways and there's a crossover on individuals between different groups, but they are all known to each other, some loosely, some quite closely, but all linked in a common purpose, we believe, at this stage.
All right, big debate. Get to it. Bromwell Bishop Stephen Conroy in a moment's time. We'll get to Megan Kelly as well. It's a big show. Thank you so much for watching. It's an All-Stars Big Power night tonight. Looking forward to it. Now, there's also this sidebar conversation about whether or not the images from the alleged church attack, I have to use my allegeds carefully, but you understand what I'm saying here, about what happened a couple of weeks ago near Fairfield, that image should be pulled from the internet. You've heard it many times about those who wish it to be so.
That bloke had half a social conscience or even 10% of one, that stuff would be pulled out.
I do expect social media platforms to be able to use their immense technological power and prowess to be able to remove such content.
Now, we are having an ongoing debate about where the line is and what can and can't and should and shouldn't be pulled down off the internet, okay? That's the debate that we're having right now. But of course, it's descending into whoever can compete the loudest to be the most abusive of the owner of X. Now, of course, when it was the owner of Twitter and it was the preferred social media platform to talk, they wouldn't dare criticise the platform. But now they're jumping off the platform because they're more than happy to muck around and spread the word on things like the Chinese surveillance app TikTok to get their political message out.
We're seeing megalomaniacs like Elon Musk going to court to fight for the right to show terrorist content, alleged terrorist content on his platform.
It just shows his arrogance. This is an egotist, totally out of touch. He clearly sees this as a vanity project for himself.
Elon Musk has no social conscience or conscience whatsoever. Quite frankly, the bloke should be jailed. The power that man has, because of that platform that he's on, it's got to stop. That bloke has no conscience. He's an absolute frigging disgrace. And there's nothing else to say about Elon Musk.
What about Meta and what's on Facebook and Instagram? What about ByteDance and the owning of TikTok, where federal politicians use the Chinese surveillance app that spreads way more crap around the world than X? And while, yes, I technically have an account, I'm not doing social. You know I don't do it. I don't swim in the internet's cesspool or look for what somebody's written about me on the internet's toilet door. I'm not interested. I don't care. But if you're going to have this outrage, feel free to have it about all of them. Instead, of course, they put the horns on the guy they don't like because it's sort of it's tangentially connected to the right wing and all this crap, please. Well, here's a fun one for you. The actual victim in the video that they are trying to ban is apparently okay with the video staying on the internet. Now, again, we can have a wider conversation about what should and shouldn't be there, but about this video itself, Bishop Mari Emanuel, who was the one who was stabbed, says it should stay online. If the victim of the crime says they are okay with the video staying online, then what exactly is the moral high horse that all our politicians want to jump upon? Now, I understand about what the purpose is they're trying to talk about, but we also know that it is a Trojan horse for them to get the mis and disinformation stuff through. Oh, let's all pretend it's about stabbings. Let's all pretend it's about terrorism, when what it really will end up being is left-wing warriors declaring the things they don't like to be misinformation, it being confirmed by people at the ACMA. The fines then go to the social media companies, and eventually the social media companies say to whatever the website is they keep getting complaints about, you can't post anymore. That's what the system is that we're really talking about here. But again, back to the bishop. Ahead of a full court hearing on May 10, Bishop Mari Emanuel has provided X with an affidavit supporting the images remaining on the platform. He is strongly of the view that the material should be available. So all these people wringing their hands on his behalf, he says it should stay online. But, of course, because this is a bishop who says things that sometimes the machine don't like, when we get into the bio, in the same story of the victim of the alleged crime, this is how it was written up in the Sydney Morning Herald, like a couple of paragraphs after what I just showed you. The bishop, who was seriously injured in the April 15 incident, is a well-known preacher in the Assyrian Orthodox Church. He has developed a worldwide online following for his conservative positions on COVID-19 measures, trans rights and geopolitics. His alleged attacker appeared to refer to him as the bishop's previous statements about Islam. I'm getting ahead of myself here, but see how? Oh, you know, look, is he really a victim? So when he says the video should stay up. Now, I want to clear something up as well here, because there's another little BS narrative that's starting to run around all of this. Now, again, we can have a very legit conversation, and I have made it very clear my personal position is that the videos that are the commissioning of a crime probably shouldn't be on the internet, right? That doesn't mean I'm against free speech, but it also means that I want to get rid of videos like, you know, the kids doing burnouts and all the rest of it up and around Toowoomba, because if they can't brag about it, then hopefully maybe they won't do it. But let's get to Peter Dutton. When all else fails, we find a way to make it about Peter Dutton on the left. He said this on Insiders, where he's talking about the videos, not the mis and disinformation stuff. He's talking about the videos. But, geez, didn't this get overinterpreted? Roland?
I think there's a bipartisan position in relation to this. We know that the companies, and we've seen some of the comments from Elon Musk overnight, they see themselves above the law, and the Australian law here should apply equally in the real world as it does online.
Okay, again, my apologies. I'm talking about the bishop. It is a victim of an alleged crime, but we follow on here. So Peter Dutton, on Insiders, we know his position when it comes to the videos, because it is also about the youth crime stuff, which he's already talked about in the past. Well, cue that apparently any sort of pushback against the mis and disinformation part, that is the stuff being loaded into the Trojan horse of let's cancel certain videos from the internet, which is what the government has been trying to do now for more than a year. Look at The Guardian turn this into any objection to changes to mis and disinformation laws is just some sort of right-wing, far right-wing, kooky fever dream. Peter Dutton may face party upset if opposition supports government's misinformation bill. Well, that's not what he said. But still, let's have a look at how they turn news into narrative, trying to set up that, again, opposition to what the government is trying to do is just a far right-wing crazy people's thing, not about a defence of democracy, where we want to make sure that the internet is able to have opinions that are unpopular, opinions that if you can back them up with data, opinions that may well come from all different parts of the spectrum, that the government doesn't get to set what's true. Peter Dutton may face a party rumour vault if the opposition elects to support the government's misinformation bill, with a number of conservative colleagues and lobby groups saying they remain strongly opposed to the changes. See, automatically, if you don't agree with what the government is trying to do to censor the internet, they're starting to marginalise you already as a bit of a kook. Coalition senators Matt Canavan, Claire Chandler and Alex Antic have all expressed strong criticisms of the proposed reforms, while the Institute of Public Affairs and the Australian Christian Lobby have also indicated that they will continue their campaign against the bill. Well, let me pierce a hole in this BS balloon before it even leaves the author's hand. The other groups that are opposed to the changes the government wants to make on mis and disinformation and deciding what truths can and can't be on the internet include, in no particular order, the Human Rights Commission, the ABC, also people who believe that it is a dangerous proposition for society. That, of course, printed in the far, far right-wing Sydney Morning Herald. And in The Conversation, where the academics write the little articles to each other. Labor's misinformation bill could jeopardise free speech online. May I read directly from this one? Should the bill pass into law as it is, it could lead to censorship, endangering the very democracy it purports to defend. So forgive me this garbage, that if you oppose mis and dis as it's currently being discussed in and around the federal parliament, the vague terms, whether there will or won't be carve-outs for news organisations, for columns or opinion, that you're out there with the nutters. The Human Rights Commission, the ABC, and intellectuals from, among other things, RMIT, are apparently out there with us. I can't stand when they play those little tricks, but they're doing it in the hope that they get what they wanted months before what happened in Bondi and what happened in Fairfield. As you know, there was inflation figures today, annually, kind of okay, but month to month, which is sort of what we probably should be looking at here, yeah, it's actually gone up, but don't worry about that. And by the way, everything that's above the average number of about 3.5%, tobacco, 12% up in the past, compare this March to last March. Insurance, up. Automotive fuel, up. Will they be cutting the petrol taxes? No, of course not. Rents up, bread and cereal up, alcohol and tobacco up, non-alcoholic beverages up, housing up, electricity up, education up, people buying new homes up, transport up, health up, food products up, all higher than the average number that they posted up there today. No wonder people in this country think that the Joint's headed in the wrong direction. That's the latest finding from an opinion poll in the Guardian, in between running all that other rubbish I was saying before, but their poll says there, now half of the country, up by 12% in 12 months, thinks the Joint is headed in the wrong direction. Oh, and you know how Jim Chalmers always says that inflation, it's not homegrown, it's all international, it's all Putin's fault.
Conflict in the Middle East is now another concerning part of the economic outlook.
Yeah, not true. You know, that crazy Australian Financial Review, well, they've pointed out that, of course, many of those things, as I've just read, homegrown inflation, not international. And who's in charge of the Australian economy? No, don't worry about it. Of course, with inflation going up on the monthly figures, the Reserve Bank, well, you can forget about any cut to interest rates that happen in the next little while, which of course means you're going to remain in a financial hole. You're going to still have to find $14,500 more than before this mob became the government to pay off your $500,000 loan, $21,000 to pay off $750,000, or more than $29,000 a year since this government came to power on trying to pay off a $1 million loan. We're good? We're happy? Everything is awesome? Again, I've got a million things here, that I want to get to, that I need to talk about, but I think we should just get straight to the debate because I know that's what you're into too. All right, stick around. We're going to have Stephen Conroy, Bronwyn Bishop. We're going to talk about all of these big issues. We'll talk about Trump. We'll talk to Megyn Kelly. We've got a big show ahead, but I'm pulling up my bit short because sometimes I get a little bit excited and we don't have enough time for the debate. So, stick in the chair. Don't go anywhere. I promise you, you're going to want to stay for the whole show tonight. Thanks for watching. Told you to look forward to this one. None other than the carryover champ, the wonderful Bronwyn Bishop. He also thinks he's the carryover champ as well. So Stephen Conroy, everyone's in their corners. Let's get straight to it here. There's a couple of things here. Obviously, the fact that the people that have been caught up in these raids, teenagers, they are from here. They are Australians. But, Stephen, let's talk about this group, right? Again, the Australian Muslim Advocacy Network. Now, whatever wonderful work they do, they have made a mistake here today because the police have gone out of their way to try to invent this term that some people may think is a little too soft, right? But still, that term isn't enough. And again, I repeat, the statement from police today was not that these people were linked by a love of the Collingwood Football Club.
No, look, that's absolutely right, Paul, and I think they have seriously damaged their cause. Mike Burgess has been one of the most moderating voices over the last couple of years, even lecturing politicians about their language and explaining publicly to politicians and the Australian community that demonising the Muslim community is counterproductive because the Muslim community provides lots of intelligence and support to our security services and our police forces to assist them in trying to keep on top of these sorts of threats that we're seeing dealt with today. So Mike Burgess has consistently called out politicians for being too far in one direction or the other and said, can we have a civil discourse? So Mike Burgess to be criticised for simply stating the facts of an issue in a quite moderate and straightforward and consistent way is to be applauded because he has been consistent and he has not been pushed by anyone in politics. He has held his ground when he's been criticised by sometimes people in politics, and he's done the right thing by the Australian community. And for this group to decide that they want to go after him because they don't want to take some degree of acceptance that they need to do more in their community to ensure Australians are safe. There have been some very responsible Muslim leaders in the papers this afternoon today in that same column that you're referring to, Paul. Some very responsible Muslim leadership, and we need to see more like them. But to go after the police, to go after Mike Burgess, shows a staggering lack of a mirror in their house, and they need to apologise absolutely to the police and to Mike Burgess.
Now, also, Bronwyn, I mean, the limits on the public discussion you can have that are all sort of ready to be triggered at any moment, right? Now, again, I say it for those that are deliberately sitting and waiting to trick us, right? Anyone who thinks you're having a pejorative conversation about people of a certain faith, it's rubbish, like absolute garbage. But what about this stuff here, right? So they say that this particular term, religiously motivated violent extremism, needs to be ditched because when it's this is their statement, which has been used in relation to the counter-terrorism raids in Sydney, which is leading to increased hate incidents towards the Muslim community. Now, anyone who is involved in hate incidents towards the Muslim community, bug you, I hope you get arrested. But the idea that we can automatically link what's said at a press conference at midday with the statement that it's banged out before the sun goes down and we're pretending that something's happened this afternoon to that community is rubbish.
Paul, that statement is deliberately trying to intimidate people not to discuss what has happened.
Yeah.
And what has happened in our country is a disgrace. And that statement means that that video should remain up. Because if it's not there for people to see, then you get people saying it never happened. It's like those ghastly images we saw of those children holding up beheaded heads. But we had to see it to know how hideous that whole regime is and was. When we saw, and I remember it well, when John F. Kennedy was shot, we had to see it to know what was happening. You cannot run a free society by trying to hide what is really happening. And I have not seen one statement come out of that group talking about what has to be done to stop these sort of organisation or terrorist groups getting together. They bear responsibility in that area. Yeah. So when we're talking about this issue, it is most important that we don't try and hide what really happened, and there has to be freedom to discuss it and to criticise it.
Yeah, so this takes us to the censorship conversation. And Stephen, again to what Bronwyn's talking about, right, which again, my reflexive position is I don't want to see crimes on the internet because there is a level of celebration that goes with them. But if the victim of the alleged terror attack is saying that what the video of him in it being attacked can stay up, then I'm not entirely sure what Jackie Lambie and a lot of other people are screaming about, because if the actual apparent victim says leave it up, then who are we to say take it down?
No, I'm sorry. I'm going to have to disagree with you on this one, Paul. And more importantly, I'm going to disagree with the tragic victim who was actually stabbed. I don't know what his motivation for this is. I don't know whether he wants the notoriety, whether he wants to be seen as a sort of martyr in this debate. But this is the sort of material.
That is a totally unfair thing to say.
I'm sorry. I'm going to disagree with him on this. Just like I agreed with taking down the New Zealand mosque murder, I don't need to see it to know it happened and know what the response needs to be, Bronwyn. I don't need to see the actual stabbing of this.
That's why they were so shocked by it. Because
but we don't need to continue to have it shown, because the internet is a sewer. And people like to use this sort of thing as a glorification, and they use it to egg other people on. There needs to be an ability to have a civil discourse in this country. If you want to say that our classification system that we've had in this country, which you've been supportive of for TV and radio and other forms of media in this country before the internet came along, has got it all wrong. They got it all wrong for the last 50 years. Bronwyn,
Stephen,
according to you now, because they should have been showing that 6 o'clock news at night.
There was no internet when JFK was shot, but those images have been around publicly forever since they were taken. So it's no good talking.
Yes,
it's not a new
unfortunately, there's now
phenomenon.
the ability for...
No, it's not a new phenomenon. There was always the ability to reach out to people and let people know what was going on. That's why at the end of World War II, that's why it was said you must take photographs of those distressing photographs of people being released from concentration camps, because if you don't do it, people will say it did not happen. So you have to have it shown so that people can see the enormity of it. With regard to what's happening in the Middle East now, with regard to what happened on the 7th of October, because the images were not shown, because they were said too distasteful, people say it did not happen. And it did happen.
Well, unfortunately,
so I'm sorry,
Bronwyn, I'm going to have to disagree with you on this
you're
one.
Wrong, Stephen.
Because what you're saying, if you want to take whether it's X or TikTok, you're seeing an ability to weaponise these images to create greater social disharmony.
By hiding
I'm presuming, Bronwyn, that you've supported the banning of Nazi salutes. You've supported the banning. I'm guessing, I don't know whether Banachek's given you permission to, but I'm assuming you voted in Parliament for the banning and supported the banning of Nazi memorabilia being sold online and all those sorts of collective.
I wanted to
exactly,
see
that's what I would
images
expect.
of what they did.
This is the same principle.
No, it's not.
Okay,
offensive.
No, it's not.
Yeah, just let me jump in. No, just let me jump in for a second, because I won't lie, I was happy to sit back and hear you, two smart people arguing it in the way that you are. But Stephen, again, to me, and again, I'm going to fail the intellectual purity test that's being set by a bunch of Conservatives at the moment, which is, nothing comes down, it is the way that it is, right? It's not a passive-aggressive crack at you, Bronwyn, or anyone else. It's just me saying, I agree when Peter Dutton turns around and says that we should take down the TikTok videos of people after stealing cars. So I'm trying to work out where that line is to the top, because, Stephen, obviously, we live in a world right now where images do get weaponised, but there are also images that become iconic because they are world-changing events. If any of those world-changing events or country-changing events happened in Australia, how would the banning regime be able to work out the difference between the iconic image of the planes hitting the two towers, or that's too distressing because of the thousands of victims, therefore it doesn't exist? How do we move forward in that world to be educated about the reality of the world, but also not wanting to add to the kooks of the world?
The problem we've got nowadays is that the ability for, and I'll use TikTok because that's the one I think is the most egregious at the moment in promoting images and storytelling that is basically propagandising on behalf of, one group against another group.
Yeah.
So I think when you understand that the ability to manipulate what people see is now being outweighing the news gathering and producing. So I'm on Bronwyn's side to a degree that people need to know. They need to know it's true. I think you made a very compelling point about you need those images of people being released from those concentration camps. But you don't need to have them manipulated, conflated and twisted by algorithms that are being essentially run by the Chinese Communist Party to try and sow social disharmony in our country as well as in other countries around the world. So we have to have a capacity to have a debate where we say there is never has been in this country.
We can't give up our freedoms because the Chinese are interfering.
Right to
That's not a good
free
reason.
speech.
That's not a good reason.
No, and there has never been an absolute right to free speech in this country, and there shouldn't be. Because I have an absolute right to walk down the street and not be abused by people who want to abuse me. My daughter has a right to walk down the street next to me and not her father abused in the street because some clown wants to do it. So I have the absolute right to free speech is at the core of your argument.
You can call a policeman and say,
and there is no such. And you would say, well, that person's got the absolute right to free speech.
So, OK, so Bronwyn, we're going to have...
That's Elon Musk's
the debate
argument.
in this fashion, all right? And
That's
we've only got
Elon Musk's arguments.
But how is this debate possible to be held in the context of a parliament framing laws to then hand to a separate group?
That is the most important position. We really have to look at that e-safety
Yeah, it's called the Classification Board. They do it every day.
Excuse me, Stephen,
They grade and view movies every day. They've done it for 50 years.
I sat on one of those, and I'm very well aware how it works. But the point is, with regard to the e-safety commissioner, the amount of power that has been put in this person's hands, someone who, when I start to look at her background, I wonder how she got there, and then I remember it was Malcolm Turnbull. But the point is, it is far too much power.
This is Tony Abbott's legislation.
Far too much power to have in one person's hands, and it takes the power away from the elected people of the parliament. And that's what we've got to remember. The more we try and take things out of the parliament and stick it over there and give them power, the worse off we are. So I think we've got to do a whole rethink about that whole office.
All right, let's get ready.
She's doing nothing about getting rid of pornography.
Round two. If they can find me a second hour, a third hour somewhere, we'll continue the debate there. All right, in the meantime, alas, we're not in the same car park, so we'll have to resume it on the television next week. Thank you, guys. All right, quick break, back with more. Megyn Kelly talking about the latest when it comes to the Trump trial and these just ridiculous protests that have got left versus left running around on campuses in the US. Our favourite time of the week is when we talk to our favourite woman in the world. Sorry, that's just the way it is. None other than the wonderful Megyn Kelly. How are you, rockstar?
I am so well. How are you?
Regardless of where people are on Israel-Palestine, we can all unite around the madness that is happening on US campuses. I hope it doesn't happen here. It's violent, it's excessive, it's clearly intimidatory, and amazingly, police can't even do anything about it. They have to be invited to do something about it by the university.
Yeah, it's amazing. The college campus thing, the cowardice of the leaderships across the board at Columbia and these other universities is absolutely disgusting. I'm so disappointed in them. I guess my expectations are appropriately set, so it's not like they've let me down big time. But if you look at, let's say, Ron DeSantis, who's the governor of Florida and has instituted rules for the state universities down there, he would never let this happen. Never. What's happening at places like Columbia and Yale and NYU is they're rolling over for these angry anti-Semitic protesters who are chanting things like death to the Jews and Al-Qassam's next target, which is the militarized wing of Hamas, standing in front of a bunch of Jewish people holding Israeli flags, encouraging violence outright and saying, well, yeah, protest, right? Like, you could get thrown off college campus not too long ago for using he instead of she in referring to a trans person. That is just exactly the kind of thing that would get you thrown off, or not believing in DEI or any of their, sacred cows.
All right, let's get to Trump. I'm sitting up in the middle of the night watching all the coverage, and it kind of feels like we're moving towards a slam dunk of guilty. But then thank goodness for you, because when I listen to your show, Sirius XM, find it on YouTube, you actually get to the absolute heart of it. And as a lawyer, you're able to start to pull it apart. And you had to listen to the opening arguments of the prosecution, and you are not impressed.
Alvin Bragg, the prosecutor in this case, revealed something in his opening statement. He's not the one actually doing the opening statement. It's his deputy, Colangelo. But they revealed something in their opening statement that shocked me. They are not going with the expected underlying felony of this case that we all expected they'd be going for. And just the brief primer is they were charging him with the misdemeanor for falsifying his business records about his hush money payment to a porn star. But the statute of limitations had expired on that, and the only way they could revive it is by saying, oh, you falsified those records to cover up a crime. Well, now you need a crime. And their crime was, we thought, this underlying felony of campaign finance violation, to pay the porn star $130,000 and not declare it as a campaign contribution. That's a violation. That's not where he's going. He seems to be going someplace else entirely, where he's just accusing Trump, the head of the National Enquirer, this tabloid magazine, and Trump's lawyer, Michael Cohen, who's going to testify against Trump, of having engaged in a conspiracy to win the election. I mean, that's really what it is. You engage in a conspiracy to win. And all the things you did, which would have been perfectly legal had you done them 6 months earlier, magically became illegal because you did them kind of close to an election. I mean, that's really how it sounds. That's what they're going with. And their lead witness was David Pecker, the guy who ran American Media Inc., the company that owns the National Enquirer, along with other tabloids, who's going to talk about how, yeah, I did. Trump was my pal. I paid off a couple of women who were threatening him. You know, somebody at the Trump organization or through Trump paid me back. We haven't yet gotten to that piece of it. And I've done this for many other people. Like even MSNBC admitted he did things like this for Bill Cosby. The exchange that he got from Bill Cosby was not to see him ascend to the presidency or a friendship with Bill Cosby, but Bill Cosby would give him exclusives and appear on the cover of the magazine. Arnold Schwarzenegger, same thing. And MSNBC is salivating saying, oh, but what they got from Trump is he's elevated into the White House. Maybe, or maybe just they were friends for a long time and he was thrilled to help his friend. I mean, Paul, if you ran for president and you needed me to bury a story for you, I would do it. I don't need access to power. You're just my friend. It happens all the time. It doesn't become a felony just because you're close in time to an important election.
Also, can we talk about the media just for a second here? Don't you love how, in order to make things much more serious, the word scheme keeps being used as if it was, you know, some plan to clip the ticket and stand over people?
You and I had a scheme to do TV tonight. I mean, you can apply that to anything. It doesn't make it illegal just because you use that word, but they keep using that word. And MSNBC is also just completely baffled by the fact that they're openly admitting that Trump had these women sign non-disclosure arrangements, or Trump or somebody on his behalf, NDAs. Yes, of course he did. What kind of an idiot would pay $130,000 to a woman to get her to shut up without getting her to sign an NDA? Everybody uses NDAs. Anybody who gets sued and pays out a real claim, anybody who gets sued and pays a nuisance judgment gets an NDA. This is not something nefarious that only Team Trump used against these poor women. These women slept with him, according to their allegations, by their own accord. There was no Me Too situation. They wanted some action. They knew he was a married man. They went for it anyway. All right. Their hands are not clean. And then when he was moving closer to, becoming a public official, they saw a chance to cash in. They wanted money to keep their stories quiet. And Trump, like most married men, is accused of paying them off to be quiet. It doesn't make it a scheme. It doesn't make the NDA nefarious. And not for nothing, but the fact that NBC News has the gall to try to demonize NDAs is really something, because that's the company. Speaking of, pay for catch and kill, they're the company that let this star reporter Ronan Farrow walk out the door with a Pulitzer Prize winning story. He would win it at a different place, the New Yorker, that exposed Harvey Weinstein as a perverted creep. Why did they let that story walk out the door? Well, Ronan's book reports, NBC denies, but Ronan reports that it was because they were worried that Harvey Weinstein, the subject of Ronan's piece, was going to out NBC's resident creep, Matt Lauer, for his antics with the sex and all the stuff with the ladies. And so do you think that NBC was having Matt Lauer's alleged affair partners, to put it as charitably as I can, sign NDAs? You're damn right they did. There's a long list of them, and I know many of them. And not just Matt Lauer. And NBC had multiple women sign NDAs when they left the company, both for Me Too related reasons and other reasons. So please spare me your false indignation at the fact that Trump, in paying off two women who consensually had sexual affairs with him outside of his marriage and potentially theirs, I don't know, he made them sign non-disclosures. It's par for the course.
Megyn Kelly, best in the business. We'll see you next week.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul. Great to see you.